Welcome everybody to Traces, Transforming Pedagogy and Practices with Babies. We're very lucky today to have Bronwyn Thomson and Priscilla Carmichael with us to share their wealth of knowledge. Bronwyn has had extensive experience as an early years teacher in both school and early learning centres. Currently Bronwyn works as Queensland Curriculum Lead for Guardian Childcare and Education, where she supports teams of educators to deliver exceptional early childhood education and care experiences for young children and their families. And we welcome Bronwyn. And with Bronwyn is Priscilla. Priscilla has worked in the early years sector for over 25 years as an early childhood teacher, and she has many years experience working in an Aboriginal community in Sydney. Priscilla has extensive experience working with vulnerable children and families as part of multidisciplinary teams. She currently holds a curriculum lead at New South Wales ACT for Guardian Childcare and Education, and supporting educators in the educational leadership and pedagogical practice. And we're very happy to have the ladies here with us. So I'll let you begin. Thank you very much, Bronwyn.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
And thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today. This presentation is Traces, Transforming Pedagogy and Practices with Babies. We would like to acknowledge that we meet today on the land of the Turrbal people, and we pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, honouring the deep connection they have with this land and the rich knowledge and culture they possess. As Kim said, my name is Bronwyn Thomson and I work as a curriculum lead for Guardian Childcare and Education. My colleague at Guardian and co-presenter here is Priscilla Carmichael. Priscilla is also a curriculum lead. Priscilla is based in Sydney and I'm based here in Brisbane, and I guess we're telling you that because it's important information for our presentation. Here is an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So during 2019, Priscilla and I embarked on a collaboration to explore the learning experiences of babies. This work was documented through video mini stories, which we'll share with you today, of babies and teachers in long daycare settings in New South Wales and Queensland. We were interested in how the image of baby orients the relationship and curriculum that is designed for and with babies. We explored the ways in which adults considered materials and how they thought about the image of material. We also want to share with you our interest in dynamic and generative curriculum decision-making processes for babies rather than static, teacher-led or thematic activities. We want to also celebrate the generosity of babies and the complexity of their learning processes. It's a little bit about how we worked. So everything in a togetherness. As early childhood professionals, Priscilla and I align in our commitment to action research. Throughout our collaboration here, it was a priority that we would research, talk, observe, act, talk, analyse and talk again. The time we gave to talk was reflective of our valuing of professional partnerships and the honouring of responsive relationships, which include listening to others, to ideas, to contexts, in order to understand. Our curiosity was provoked by our discussions on curriculum making decisions with babies. We question practices with babies and any child, which includes activities such as handprints, colouring in, stencils, and other product-driven experiences. Social media is filled with images promoting these practices with corresponding likes and comments such as, "So cute." The popularity and provision of these experiences is worth contesting, both from an intentional teaching perspective and also from an image of child perspective. Working primarily through video mini stories, we made visits to babies and their teachers, we collected video footage, and we analysed our observations. The understandings we had of generative rather than emergent or thematic curriculum decision-making were important. We understood that generative and dynamic curriculum decision-making situates learning within the complexity and multiplicity of relationships and contexts, is carried out through observation, documentation, and dialogue, accepts doubt, error, and uncertainty as important resources in the evolution of thought and action. The decisions we made about each step forward were deliberated after the analysis of notes, photos, and video. And this process happened through regular remote meetings, keeping a kind of a pace with each other across the states. This meant that collaborative analysis of our material was timely and that comparisons across sites were made. Throughout our inquiry, the processes of questioning, observation, and analysis brought with it the potential of uncertainty and surprise, and further insight into the rich capacities of babies and their teachers. Dynamic and generative curriculum decision-making and the rhizome as a metaphor. To scaffold our understandings of the processes of a generative curriculum design model, Priscilla and I read about rhizome theory, a concept developed by Deleuze and Guattari. Rhizomatic theory and the metaphor of the rhizome and a bamboo or ginger plant grows from a rhizome offered further perspective. A rhizome is not ordered. Its shape is ever evolving and unique. The rhizome concept provides us with endless possibilities for making new connections, going in different directions. Rhizomatic theory includes that everything is relational and generative, growing through active, ongoing processes. The rhizome can be seen as a metaphor for structure and organisation, which includes the possibility of surprise. The rhizome has no beginning and no end. It's always in the middle between things. The rhizome is not ordered and its shape is ever evolving and unique. To think with the concept of rhizome theory is to consider the many, many ways to approach a subject. Everything can be considered as complex and interrelated. Think of a map where any point could either be a place to start, a place to travel through, or an end point. Like dynamic and generative curriculum decision-making, the rhizome is both noun and verb, subject and process. Each one of us needs to have curiosity, and we need to be able to try something new based on the ideas that we collect from the children as they go along. The image of child and the image of baby. We understand that the image of the child, and there are hundreds of them, orients the relationships and curriculum that is designed with and for children in early childhood settings. An image of the child and the way we see children in the context of society is derived from family values, beliefs, culture, the media, and personal educational experiences. Every teacher and adult carries with them an image of child that directs the ways in which they relate to children. What is the image of the baby? There are many held perceptions on how babies learn, and these are linked with the image we each hold of baby. Historically, babies have been seen as highly dependent and vulnerable, defined by their care needs, lacking in self-awareness and the agency to learn and develop with autonomy. The image of baby suggests a baby who is reliant on the adult for all knowledge and lacking in the ability to negotiate the complexities of social interactions and logical thinking. A societal image of baby may also include adjectives such as cute, vulnerable, helpless, innocent, and phrases such as blank slate or sponge for learning. Babies may be viewed through a developmental lens, and their learning defined as a series of generalized steps or stages, which include walking, talking, and developing social and critical thinking skills. When the image of baby and baby learning is one of deficit and dependency, then the offerings we make to babies are simplified, and diminished. Our long-held image of baby is that babies are born with rich competencies and potentials. A child who is powerful from the moment of birth because of being open to the world and capable of constructing his or her own knowledge. The desire to communicate and share is innate from birth, and babies actively seek to make connections to relationships, places, self, and time. Babies are the keenest of observers, attentive to everything, and constantly learning through the security of trusted connections. Familiar relationships, daily care rhythms, and places support each baby's learning and development, and every day brings growth at an astonishing rate. It is the image of the child who from the moment of birth is so engaged in developing a relationship with the world and intent on experiencing the world that he or she develops a complex system of abilities, learning strategies, and ways of organising relationships. Throughout our research, we were drawn to continually reflect on the potentials of babies and their complex processes of learning as we observed and documented babies in relationship with teachers and materials. The image of material. Materials can be intriguing and full of possibilities. Materials have unique properties that can be explored and acted upon. Materials make offerings to the hands and to the eyes. Through whole body questioning, a baby naturally enters a dynamic relationship with materials, which is so much more than the cause and effect, turn-taking and sensory play that is frequently the stereotype of our expectations. Materials present challenges and they offer questions. This is not a place of baby doing to a material, but rather a being with, a relationship of focus and vitality. When babies act on materials, the materials are transformed. But in the process of engaging with materials, babies' learning is also transformed. We wondered, what happens when we offer babies one material as a focus for exploration and meaning making? One material to clearly see the learning processes of babies. One material to encounter the image of baby in practice. One material to fully explore the potentials and complexities of that material. And one material to explore curriculum decision-making processes with babies. White tissue paper. The one material we chose was white tissue paper. The choice to explore curriculum decision-making through one material exclusively, white tissue paper, was thoughtful. White tissue paper is full of potentials and possibilities. It is light and easily moved or transformed by the actions of a baby. The choice of white was deliberate and an invitation for babies and their teachers to move beyond colour and to consider the other properties of the paper. White tissue paper is not a traditional resource for a baby, and so it requires that the teacher move beyond the understanding of paper as an art or craft material. To work with the material in this more focused way in order to understand the potentials and limitations of the material is to begin to develop concepts of material literacy and to reframe the image of material, in this case white tissue paper, as an intelligent material. To stay with one material over extended time requires a slowing down on the part of the adult, and this slowing down brings opportunity to listen and to see both the baby and the material. We asked, do teachers know the properties and potentials of materials? How have teachers previously viewed and worked with materials? Do teachers know how to invite babies to explore materials? Do we consider the potential of materials in a curriculum for babies? Tissue paper is a complex material and it has a language and it holds surprises. We began to consider the concepts of whole, part, large, small, flat, crumpled as curriculum decisions. There are subtleties to the language. For example, crumpled tissue paper prefers to sit, while flat tissue paper catches the air and it will move. There are points of no return. Once tissue paper has been crumpled, it will not uncrumple. Large pieces of paper, once they have been torn, cannot be untorn. Post-humanism and intra-action. Priscilla and I were keen to understand more about the potentials of materials and the image of material as dynamic and rich in possibility. Our readings on post-humanism were transforming our understandings of materials, including the potential of intra-action through relationship between the child and the material. An intra-active pedagogy, as conceptualized by Lens Taguchi, contests the idea of child-centeredness and explores the implications for practice if we consider that all human lives are inextricably enmeshed with others, both human and non-human, including materials. In this context, relations, not the child, are central to everything. A post-humanist lens contests the image of material as passive, as existing only to be acted on. It moves our thinking beyond the doing to the being, as child, material, and experience are transformed within relationship. And it illuminates the agency which emerges from within a relationship, the spaces in between. We wondered, what happens when we offer the babies one material as a focus for exploration and meaning making? What are the possibilities and potentials of tissue paper for learning? How will the babies adapt their thinking to the tissue paper repeatedly over time? Learning is complex and each child travels a unique path. Is it possible to observe and analyse the learning processes of babies more clearly when we distill the stimulus? The potentials of tissue paper. In Brisbane, we anticipated the introduction of babies and tissue paper. The tissue paper was offered as a few large pieces only as a beginning. And initially the paper was placed in a tucked away space, away from the noise and movement of the larger space. And we moved the babies to the research place. A place to focus was the reasoning here, a place to focus on the tissue paper. Harry's tentative beginnings. The babies were cautious. The place was strange and new. There was tentative contact through observation, attentive observation of everything, and small encouraged touches. Harry's teacher said, "I honestly think that the babies didn't know what to do because they were in a different environment. It's not natural, is it? You have your reservations." Of course. The paper was shifted back to the open, where the babies had connections of familiarity and where the daily rhythms of care and relationship continued on around us. Connections to place are important, but we could see there was more. Come on, Harry. Whoa!
No, you're paying too much attention. She's looking so much at you. Hello. Wait, Noah.
All relations are situated and complex. In Sydney, the initial invitations were presented. They were also met by the babies with small touches and glances. The babies were aware of the paper, but there was also an attentiveness to everything. Across both contexts, it was clear to see the babies' particular attentiveness to relationships. Matteo was presented with a few large white sheets of paper to explore. Matteo was cautious, tentative in his approach to the experience and the material. Yet he was also extremely focused on the wider context, the stranger in the room, myself as documenter, the sounds, the other people and children, the space around him, and the daily life within the centre. He took time to process his surroundings. Reviewing Matteo and other children's expressions through video documentation helped us to see the baby's relations as situated and complex. Here, we repeatedly observed the significance of the baby's check-in with the teacher and that they engaged in the continual environmental sweep, which encompassed the complexity of all aspects of the experience. The babies were aware and responsive to everything. This was a moment of revelation for us as we began to note and describe all the subtle exchanges at play, which we observed being interpreted by the babies. Informed by our readings on the interdependence and interconnections described by posthumanism, we began to describe the observed complexities within a given situation as the interaction. This is not just a matter of teachers setting up an experience to engage with the material and expect that this is all that we will observe. The presence of others. Complex influences shape the exchange between baby and material. Later, during the same session, it was interesting to note the way Matteo approached the material when another baby was present nearby. It seemed as though the mere presence of Harry, a familiar peer, instilled a confidence in Matteo, and he reached out repeatedly to engage with the material. Still seeking the reassurance of his teacher, not seemingly engaging overtly with Harry, but less concerned with the stranger, me, now. Is this the sensitivity of the baby to the complexity of the experience? The presence of another is enough to spur a new line of flight for Matteo. Matteo's teacher, Nicole, in our reflection together on this video, spoke of the great competency of Matteo in his ability to assimilate so many interactions. The subtlety of babies. Marnie's approach to the material, to teachers, to me, the stranger, was one of openness and gentleness, a quiet confidence. Observing her closely, we saw her attentiveness to the complexities surrounding her, her focus on relationships, her acknowledgement of sounds around her, her exploration of holding the material in a variety of ways, her initiation of a silent game with her teacher, Kate. In Kate, we see her responsiveness to this subtlety, with her own catching of Marnie's offerings and throwing back, but with smallness, facial expressions, head movements, smiles, open hands, positioning at Marnie's level. Observation and slow considered offerings. Close, careful observation of babies enables the revelation of hidden complexities. There is sophistication to their relationships and learning. Babies are social, and babies learn from other babies. As teachers, our offering to babies is revealed through adult, close, careful observation and unhurried time, where the warmth of the responsive listening adults moves to a place of attunement with baby. There are tender touches and gentle ripples of connectedness through relationships with each other, with materials, with the world. This is the subtlety of babies. And when we reveal this subtlety, we also reveal the pressure teachers feel to teach, to be worthwhile in their roles, to meet expectations, perhaps leading to an over-intervening in our striving to be intentional. This pressure to teach, to label, to assess and evaluate the moment can become a race to move on to the next, to more. Teachers describe their commitment to providing the best for baby, while also wanting to share with the family how their actions are ensuring the best experience for baby. Within this perceived pressure to teach, moving slowly, watching and listening without overtly inserting ourselves and introducing smaller, considered changes is not easy, and teachers may worry that their actions are not enough. The urge to teach is probably instinctive, but is also prompted by an outmoded image of baby as the empty vessel waiting to be filled with knowledge. Our curiosity was provoked by our discussions with nursery teachers, and we asked, how can we listen to the baby first in a focused and sensitive way before making decisions about our intentions as teacher? An interactive pedagogy embraces the knotty mess of relationships within which experiences occur, developing our understanding of the subtlety involved and an appreciation that the worth of an experience does not have to be linked to grand gestures or obvious epiphanies or a clear linear link between the teaching of the teacher and the learning of the baby. Small moments matter, small movements matter, small decisions matter.
White tissue paper holds its own mysteries and subtleties, which can be quickly dismissed within the pressure of proving that our teaching must result in babies learning. The provision of time and opportunity for many meetings between baby and material values the capabilities of both. In our collaboration with teachers across each state, we observed the pressures to teach resulted in a moving quickly from the inherent qualities of the white paper to add more resources, more colours, more shapes, more sounds to the paper. The rapid changes made appeared to situate the tissue paper as not enough and to relegate the learning processes of the baby to the background in the race to be brighter, louder, more entertaining. Onyx's teacher shared the following: I think I've been conditioned to make the environment pleasing. I think it's not even the babies that are asking for this. I think it's the pressure that we feel is expected from us, from me. I think that I have to change things, or I worry that the families will think that the babies are doing nothing. In the following example, Onyx demonstrates white tissue paper is enough. Urgency. Onyx has watched other babies pull the tissue paper out and he cries. At first I think he is tired or hungry, as this is an insistent cry. His teacher moves him closer and I realise that Onyx is crying to ask to be included. Onyx is communicating his urgent interest, and because he's not yet crawling, he requires the attentive adult in the role of interpreter to provide him with the proximity he needs. The tissue paper has an identity that Onyx must begin to know, and he has demanded an introduction. With hands that are opening and closing and arms pumping with excitement, Onyx explores with urgency and focus. Urgent was not a word I had previously considered in my relation to tissue paper, and Onyx with his urgency and intensity challenges my thinking. Onyx's emotive expressions here are the hurry of wanting to know now and the worry of missing out. Once in contact with the tissue paper, Onyx clearly moves beyond the stereotype of material as something to be manipulated, to be acted on. This is a place of meeting and meaning making through powerful and urgent interaction. The tissue paper has a purity in and of itself. It is autotelic. It is enough. It is white. White objects reflect and scatter all the visible wavelengths of light. The paper here is white. It has layers. It tears and crumples and it reveals a vast range of values, from the most translucent of whites and bright whites to the deeper, darker greys of hollows and secret spaces. Do we see white as less than, boring, too simple for a baby? Is this reflective of our image of baby? Do we worry that white does not garner a baby's attention? Do they need bright colours in order to be interested? Whilst white has an absoluteness, it has the potential for many nuances. As babies come to know of the material, the opportunity arises for them to become familiar with this complexity. As the material transforms in shape and size, is acted upon by people, by light, by air, it reveals different values of white. It acts in different ways. It can appear to shift in appearance, just as our perceptions shift. If we fail to see the experience from the baby's perspective, how does this affect our intentionality and the decisions that we make? Are we missing the clues that babies are giving us during the experiences, important clues to their competencies in communicating their own engagement? Is there room here for us as teachers to truly practice a pedagogy of listening and hence transform our own perceptions of the baby's competency and the value of the material. If we begin to understand and acknowledge this complexity, begin to transform our own understanding, can we then recognise the material as not deficient, as not uninteresting, but instead see the potentiality of the material itself? The material in a post-humanist perspective also acts upon the baby. It is agentic, it is intelligent. It is not just acted upon or transformed by babies and adults. How does it surprise the baby when it rips, when it crumples, when it becomes wet from being put in the mouth, when it floats or rolls? Does it look different under certain conditions from different angles? When it is flat as opposed to being crumpled, when it is large and whole as opposed to once ripped and small? How can it be strong yet easily torn? How can it float in one instance yet drop quickly in another? How can I hold and unhold it? Does this change the baby's perception, use and understanding? Does it present a new problem for the baby? Does it then motivate the baby for further engagement to get to know more about the material and its potential? How can one material be so many different things? Where is the limit here? When will I truly and fully understand this material? Or are the possibilities limitless? White tissue paper is not given in an instant. Joseph's research with the tissue paper is characterised by intensity. Joseph reaches, gathers and pulls the larger pieces of paper up in soft bunches against his cheeks. Like a swimmer heading out from shore, Joseph dives to bury his face, gather, quick rapid reach out at full stretch, release and pull and gather once more. This is Joseph and the tissue paper in a tidal ebb and flow of movement and sound connection, a quick gather, immerse and release, a surrender. This submerge was something that was noticed across contexts with the different babies. This was more than mouthing the paper. It was a burying of cheeks and forehead and repeating this. Hypothesis, engagement, observation and repeat. The movements of both Joseph and the paper create continuing and changing focal points, which require Joseph's attention. For example, edge, corner, crease, flat, billow, rupture, under, over and more. The reveals appear endless. When a small piece of paper tears away from the whole, a new game emerges as Joseph, not yet crawling, chases the paper across the space. The sound of movement. Like Joseph, Noah can be observed in relationship with the paper, where his different interactions unlock different properties of the tissue paper, which further unlock different interactions from Noah. Noah explores the paper in its entirety, and the wholeness covers and envelopes his body, exaggerating the movements made by Noah with corresponding and amplifying movements made by the paper. The lightness of the paper provides for flow of movement and encourages Noah's grasp. And with each contact point and movement with the paper, it produces satisfying sound. Patting, scrunching, curling his feet towards his hands, Noah and the paper make sound together, the sound of movement.
The revelation of ripping. Lola, Marnie's twin sister, approached the material with openness and increasing joy throughout our time with her. The more times she met the material, the more her engagement increased. In this session, Lola ripped the paper a few times before she seemed to register that she was responsible for this change in the material. But a particularly satisfying ripping noise seemed to make this connection for her, and she looked immediately to the adults nearby as if to ask if they heard this too. As Lola explored her newfound ability of both herself and the material to generate itself as she ripped, she discovered she could then offer out pieces of the material to others.
Thank you.
Immediately after this, each time Lola picked up the paper, she employed the same strategy to rip it over and over again. Time and opportunity for repetition enabled Lola to work intensively towards her mastery of her new ability. However, in the next session, Lola discovered a problem. Ripping was easy if the paper was somewhat flat, but the strength of the material, once bundled together, thwarted her once successful strategy. She seemed perplexed by this strange turn of events. We wondered how Lola would solve this problem, but we see she seems to search immediately for the edge of the material. We don't know the answer yet, but we'll watch closely to see how Lola's thinking progresses. These are the threads of connection we travel, which have different directions, speeds, and intensities. Generosity. Generous quantities of the material made more visible, more audible, the language of the paper. Billowing, flourishes, scrunching, which seemed to respond back to the baby's advances. The paper appeared to generate itself as babies discover tearing and ripping, more and more pieces appear. Where there was one, there is now two. And when there is more than one, it can now be offered out, shared with others. A generosity revealed itself, first in the material, then in the baby. Multiplicity. The baby and the material come to know each other through a multiplicity of processes and relationships knotted together, involving interrelation, interaction, interdependence, and intra-action. This is a complexity of more, an entanglement that is so much more than reciprocity, but rather an interweaving that demands more time, more thought, more repetition. No relationship, be it with material or human or place, in isolation. Everything together. Traces. After each repetition of the experience, the material holds traces of the identity of those who touched it. It encompasses a history of the actions engendered by its affordances, traces of the interactions, traces of the agency it inspired in babies, traces of its own external transformation, as well as the internal transformation of the thoughts of babies and adults. Traces left behind of the connections made, the web of relationships, the history of layers of experience, the potential yet to come. Time. Tentatively, slowly, softly, relationships are formed. More than one, more than two, a multiplicity of interactions occur. Through coming to know the material, the babies and adults have the opportunity to come to know themselves and each other. Each iteration, each repetition exposes new growth in the rhizome, a new potential, sometimes predicted, often unexpected, but all taking time. The entanglement. Nothing in isolation. We came to further conceptualize the idea of the entanglement babies experience. This relates to the baby and the teacher in terms of engaging with the material and the interpreting by the teacher of what is happening for the baby who is coming to know the material. This perception may shift dependent on the multiplicity of other interactions occurring. Without the layering of perspectives, we can get somewhere, but we can't get far enough. During observation and review of video documentation, we could see the complex interaction of relationships with people, place, and things, with the aesthetic environment, the entanglement. This is more than sensory exploration. This is more than reciprocity between child and material. This is more than social constructivism. There is a hidden or perhaps unnoticed complexity occurring. The dynamic process of a meaningful experience involves reciprocity, interrelation, interaction, interdependence, and intra-action, a multiplicity of processes and relationships knotted together. The relationship of human to object in reality is not just subject-object, not just a dualism, but an entanglement of relationships, of material, of time, of place. The focus of attention shifts, constantly redefining the limits of what we perceive and know. Here is one of the models we created to describe the entanglement we observed. This was a multiplicity that was so much more than reciprocity, an interweaving that demanded more time, more thought, more repetition. As we considered the traditional programming decisions made for babies, we wondered, are we as teachers perhaps no longer noticing this complexity, a normal part of our human existence, but not yet normal for a baby whose daily life involves navigating this multiplicity, absorbing and integrating it, all whilst trying to engage with the material? Is this hidden complexity perhaps why we as teachers perceive the baby as not interested in the material itself and assume we need to make experiences more interesting by adding colour, moving spaces, adding more and more materials? What are we expecting to see in babies' reactions as they engage with a material that we are not seeing? As babies experience this very complex entanglement that prompts us to move on so quickly to a new, more interesting experience. Do we fail to see the energy babies are expending on making sense of such multiplicities that we miss the subtleties of their engagement with materials, with people, and with place? Do we fail to see the amazing competence of babies as they contend with such complexity? As we saw babies during these experiences attend admirably to all aspects of the entanglement. Babies don't have any relationship, be it with material or human or place, in isolation. Transforming pedagogy. Our study here raised many questions that continue to inform our collective thinking. The use of video documentation allowed for teacher and researcher to be in the moment with babies. Repeated reviewing of this video documentation enabled multiple revisiting with multiple perspectives, which prompted discussion, dialogue, divergent and convergent views, consideration of possibilities. It made evident how much we miss and highlighted the subtlety of babies. It supported teachers to transform their understanding, their future intentions, their interventions, their choices, their decision-making. It revealed the pressure teachers feel to teach, to be worthwhile in their roles, to meet expectations. It made visible the silencing of babies and the power relations inherent in our experiences with babies and materials, our subjectivity and the need for an ethical response re our values, our image of baby, our image of materials, and our image of our role as teachers. If we adopt a post-humanist lens, we can understand that the material acts as a catalyst to transform the perceptions and meaning-making of babies and ourselves. Here, we are declaring a democratic equality in the relationship between people and the relationship with materials, affording the material more rights in the time, space, and opportunity of designing our curriculum for babies. Just as babies come to the experience from a context, so do the teachers. A history of past experiences, of knowledge, of understanding, of qualification. We hope through these videos, you have experienced the tender touches of our babies reaching out to the world. For us, this research made visible the generative learning processes of our babies' interior worlds. Our shared image of baby as born with rich competencies and potentials was our anchor in this work, our launch pad, our stepping off point, the first shoot of the rhizome. As our time with our babies drew to a close, we reflected on the way we ourselves had been transformed, on our reimagined image of baby, richer, more nuanced, more layered, more in so many ways. Their complex processes of learning, their sophisticated strategies, their subtlety, their generosity of spirit, inviting us in to see and experience the world as they do, through their eyes, their hands, their voice, their expressions. If we listen sensitively and responsively to babies, our offerings back to them as teachers ought to recognise, uphold, and celebrate this image. Thank you for sharing in this time with us today.